Hey guys, Desolator Magic back with another great video, and this time I want to talk about some of the spoilers from Shadows over Innistrad. Now at the time this video is being filmed, we only know of 109 cards out of 297, so roughly a little over 1/3 of them, so if you see some cards missing, it's probably because you're watching this in the future. I specifically want to talk about the number one thing that affects the price of a card, and that's how powerful it is in modern decks, or if a modern deck can use it as a replacement for a less powerful version of the card. And unsurprisingly, there's actually quite a few in Shadows over Innistrad. Now, if you remember back in OGW, we're talking about like Kozilek's Return that hit about $20 a card just because it was a replacement for one tiny little card that's in like one or two modern decks. Specifically replaced Pyroclasm as just a little bit better version of it, so a lot of people hopped on it, and it wasn't absolutely mandatory either because the secondary trigger really wasn't that great. Now I'm all for selling cards for a higher price, but there's one deck that I think they really beefed up, like to the point where it's completely and utterly ridiculous. I have a feeling this might result in some card bans, but in the meantime, hey, it just means more money for me and more money for you guys. I'm also going to hit on a couple cards that look good on the surface but really aren't, because I know people will mention them. Also, if I fail to mention a card, it's probably because it's just a common or uncommon, so I don't really care what the price does, because it's not going to hit $10. The first card I want to mention is, of course, Brain in a Jar. Everybody's saying, oh, it's the new Aether Vial. No, it isn't. What they did is they looked at Aether Vial, they said, we want to print something kind of like that. Oh, but Aether Vial is a completely unfair pile of crap. So let's print a version of Aether Vial that's actually fixed. And there you've got Brain in a Jar. Now, you pay one, you tap the card. So the card's already done, and you still had to pay one to do it. You put a charge counter on Brain in a Jar, and then you must immediately cast an instant or sorcery card with converted mana cost equal to the number of charge counters on Brain in a Jar from your hand without paying its mana cost. Hey, did you notice that it didn't say the word creatures? That's how nerfed it is compared to Aether Vial. So there's no fixing the charge counters and then later casting the spell, and the spell is going to effectively cost you one colorless regardless. There's also absolutely no way to repeat this. You can't do it again. You can't cast a spell that costs 3 and then cast another spell that costs 3. Unless, of course, you remove scry counters, which, let me just hit on that ability for a second. You pay 3, so your turn's basically done at that point, and then you tap it and remove X charge counters from Brain in a Jar, scry X. That is a completely impossible decision to make, what the value of X should be, because you don't know how many cards down your card that you want is, and you could say scry 5 and then it's on the very top, it's the next card. I mean, you don't know, and then you don't know how low to make your charge counters go in order to make the card that you scried to the top be castable. So overall it's kind of a bad card, but it's one of those things where if you have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cast cost deck, you could just zoom up and just free cast one card per turn if you got really lucky, so that's kind of cool. Next up, let's hit Pick the Brain. Unfortunately, it costs 3, otherwise people would play it in Modern. It's basically a Thoughtseize with no real downside, and then you exile the card, which is pretty nice. It does handle any non-land card at all, and then the Delirium effect is insane. It's basically infinite obliteration, which honestly is what you should be casting instead of this card. So I think this card is definitely going to go nowhere. But then there's Geralf's Masterpiece. Holy cow, is this card powerful. Now, it's not quite as powerful as I'd like, and it does cost 5, but it's flying, which is fantastic. And all it does is get -1/-1 for each card in your own hand. If you know you can control your hand pretty well and just arbitrarily cast spells, not like hold a ridiculous horde of anti-magic, you can actually control how many spells are in your hand. Holy crap, is this powerful. This could very well be the most powerful creature ever printed in blue. The only thing that I can think of that's close is Nixithid, and he's a 7/7 for 3, he's not flying, but he gets -1/-1 for each card in the chosen player's hand. He's the same power and toughness, but he's not flying. He does cost 2 less, which is fantastic. He's an elemental, which, whatever, might come up, probably not in black. But then you also get to choose an opponent. So usually one-on-one it's your opponent, and then it's however many cards they have in hand. With Geralf's Masterpiece, you get to choose how many cards you have in hand to a certain extent. That's why I think this is going to find itself into some sort of modern deck, some sort of like blue mix deck. I mean, pretty much nobody plays blue, and this is not exactly a merfolk, so I don't know what it would go in, but it's a lot of damage for blue. So if there's some kind of blue deck that's on the edge but just needs some aggro to finish the game, there it is. I mean, 7 damage in the air for blue, it's a Leviathan with a damn jetpack on its back. I mean, it's just crazy. Anyway, let's move on to a card that looks awfully familiar. It's Aberrant Researcher. Hey look, it's a clone of Delver of Secrets. Oh no, wait, it isn't, because it costs 4, so get over it. The card turns into a 5/4 flyer, great. Honestly, a 5/4 flyer for 4 is barely even a good card. It's good for blue, obviously, but there are other cards about that powerful. You know why they printed a fixed version of Aether Vial and a fixed version of Delver of Secrets? Because they're way too damn powerful. Now on the flip side, card flipping puns. We've got Thing in the Ice, which is already hitting a high of about $20, which really should indicate its power level considering it's not even mythic. This card is disgustingly stupidly powerful. For 2 mana, you get a 0/4 defender. That alone is pretty good. I mean, there are better walls out there, but that's pretty good. And then it gets 4 ice counters on it whenever you cast any instant or sorcery spell at all, which they forgot to put the word blue in there, oops. Then you remove an ice counter, and then as soon as it has no ice counters, you flip it. And what do you get when you flip it? This OP is all hell, especially for blue creature. A 7/8. Not only do you get the 7/8, but whenever it transforms, return all non-horror creatures to their owner's hands. I don't play with a whole lot of horrors, people. This is a board wipe for 2 with the strongest blue creature that's ever been printed. I don't know what kind of drugs they were on when they designed this card, but it should just be banned already. I'm sure they're considering banning it in Modern. I have a deck idea that it'll go in, but let's hit that up later. Next up, we've got Eerie Interlude. This looks pretty powerful in Standard depending upon the type of deck that you're playing, but in Modern I'm not 100% sure, but it looks promising because it's a non-instant flicker effect, so it's like a tortoise flicker, I guess you could call it, although tortoises typically come back the next turn. For 3 mana, as an instant, you can exile any number of target creatures you control. No parameter, no limit, no mana size, nothing. So it's very nice. But then you return those cards to the battlefield under their owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So it's sort of like an ultra turbo fog for your creatures. You could also just block with a whole row of them and then poof, they're gone, and then the creatures are considered blocked. So there's a lot you can do with it. I mean, if it cost 2, it would be completely mental. Somebody would put it in some sort of Modern deck. But as it sits, I'm not 100% sure. I mean, if you had a really good enter the battlefield effect on multiple creatures, which is usually not the case. You know, with yo-yo decks, it's usually just 1 creature. And so that would make the spell cost a little much, but I could see it. I mean, it's not like it has rebound or anything, but it might find its way into a deck. Next up, we got one of the stranger cards I've seen, but I just love it. It's flavor, it's hilarious, it's a brand new idea. I've never seen anything like it. Wish it was a rare, but at least that means I can get my hands on it, so there's definitely a silver lining. Haha, rarity puns. So you put this onto the battlefield for a mere 1 black mana, and then just leave it sitting there taunting your opponent. I mean, look at that. Look at his eyes. He's like looking at your opponent. He's like, yeah, keep your eyes on me because I'm going to blow your stuff up. That's what I'm going to do. All you have to do to activate his amazing ability to destroy any target creature is to pay 1 black mana, pay 1 life, put the top card of your library into your graveyard, discard a card, do the hokey pokey, sacrifice Sinister Concoction, and then there you go. You destroyed any target creature for technically 1 mana, I guess 2, but you could do it on a split turn, so yeah, I mean, and then if somebody's dumb enough to burn like an enchantment removal on this, it's usually not worth it. So this could technically be sort of the cheapest kill spell in all of Modern. Now, does it technically compete with Murderous Cut? I'm not sure about that. I would lean towards no, but it sort of depends. And then you've got like your Utter End, and then in just mono, you've got things like Go for the Throat, maybe even Bile Blight, technically you could say. So, never underestimate the ability of splitting your mana between turns, though, because this could, like I said, technically cost 1. Speaking of black kill cards, let's talk about To the Slaughter. This is a rare instant of a giant creature taking out some adorable little lamb, but it doesn't just kill lambs, it kills planeswalkers as well. In fact, we might be looking at some hinted at information that that's the first lamb planeswalker ever made. Anyway, there was a recent card that looked just like this, except it costs 4. So to take it down to 3 and then maintain the fact that it's an instant is unbelievable, and then they included Planeswalkers. That's 2 upgrades. Delirium, who cares? Never going to happen in Modern. I mean, unless you literally put it in a Tarmogoyf deck, you cannot count on that. Also, the Delirium ability completely sucks on this card, so just ignore it. Basically, target player sacrifices a creature or planeswalker of their choice. That is the problem. They get to choose the creature. So, planeswalker, okay, they probably don't have 2 out, but then, if there's a creature on the field, they could just blow up the creature instead of the planeswalker, so that's a little bit of a problem. So the optionality is bad, but it does get around any kind of hexproof, indestructible, anything. So I could see this slipping into certain decks, at least in the sideboard. Next up, we got that creepy looking chick that lives in the woods, Arlen Cord. She has, first of all, I should start with the fact that she's a flip card, and she's a planeswalker on both sides. I mean, that's just weird, but we've seen some weird stuff, whatever. Keeping it fresh, I guess. So she has a +1 and a 0, which is a little bit odd, but she is a 3 loyalty for 4. That's a little rough, but she's total ramp colors, so no problem there. Until the end of turn, on the +1 ability, up to 1 target creature gains +2/+2 and vigilance and haste. That is insane for any type of, like, zoo deck or anything that uses a Tarmogoyf for just anything. And then for 0, she can put out a 2/2 green wolf token on the battlefield and then flip herself. The +1 ability on her wolf side is completely absurd. Creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain trample until end of turn. That's just nuts. I mean, especially for the type of decks that this would go in Modern. For -1, which is not that big of a negative, Arlen, Embraced by the Moon, deals 3 damage to target creature or player and then transforms back. Now that one's a little bit of a downside because then you have to bring out another wolf token later and you gotta kind of split your turns. But you could just outright kill the player with that. So it's like a free lightning bolt, which is, for -1, not that bad, especially since you could do it, I guess not really twice in a row, but she could do it immediately after flipping the next turn. And of course the -6 is absolute game over. Your creatures just tap and deal their power directly to the player, or a creature, as if you just do it to the player. So it's kind of like unblockable and trample. It's just an auto win. So I think they put that one a little bit too low, which is why I think she's definitely going to see some Modern play for sure. Now the chances of you winning before you actually get the -6 are huge because she's so damn powerful. For Nahiri, I think, a 4 loyalty planeswalker for 4. Okay, great. It's reasonable. A little bit expensive. And then for +2, you may discard a card if you do draw cards. So a little bit, little scry swap and whatever. It's a +2, which is cool, instead of a -2. So that's something. And then for -2, she can exile target enchantment tapped artifact, which is oddly specific, or tapped creature. So an unlimited removal, I mean, that's pretty nice. She could do that at least 2 times before blowing herself up, and it's perfectly reasonable to expect her to do it 3 times. Unfortunately, overall, she definitely seems like she screams sideboard, so I don't think she's going to go nuts on the price, and it's not like you absolutely have to have her for a Modern deck, and the colors kind of throw people off, but I could definitely see her going in something. Next up, we've got the $1 million question. Is Falcon Wrath Gorger better than Monastery Swiftspear? He does not have prowess, but a 2/1 for 1 is pretty darn powerful. Monastery Swiftspear has haste, though, and has prowess as well, so kind of hard to say between the two. I mean, I would still maybe lean towards Monastery Swiftspear, but I also like absolute 2 every single turn no matter what occurs. But then again, would red really go another turn without casting a single spell? It sounds completely absurd, and then he's easier to kill. So maybe Monastery Swiftspear might still be the king for a little bit. Next up, we've got the card Traverse the Ulvenwald, whatever. It's that place that they need to burn down. Just burn it to the ground, because I don't know if you guys read the story, but that place is a complete crap hole. Anyway, as a sorcery, but who cares, you get to pay 1 and then search your library for a basic land card, not even just a forest, any basic land card, put it in your hand and then shuffle your library. Delirium, who cares, never going to happen. But if it did, holy crap, you can go get any creature out of your entire deck and put it into your hand. That's insane, for 1 stupid mana. Now, when it comes down to, is this card more effective than Explosive Vegetation, Nissa's Pilgrimage, Sylvan Scrying, Nissa's Renewal, Nissa's everything else, and all those other cards I'm forgetting, and Land Grant and all that? I think it is, just because it costs 1. I really don't think that the Elf decks needed an upgrade, but here it is, unfortunately. Next up, it is my complete displeasure that I have to announce to you guys this travesty. It's Vessel of Volatility. Now, if you were to use it on the turn that you actually played it, you're paying 4 to get 4. It's idiotic. I mean, okay, it's maybe a double mana fixer, I guess. Well, let's say you decide to throw this out there and then split your turns. That's where we've got a problem. Now, if you don't think free mana is a problem, look up a deck called Charbelcher. Let me tell you about Charbelcher in a modern perspective. Okay, let's go down the list here. Simian Spirit Guide is legal, Pyretic Ritual is legal, and Desperate Ritual is legal. I don't know why any of those three haven't been banned, honestly, because Storm is just freaking ridiculous. You can't just give people free mana. Want some proof? Elvish Spirit Guide, illegal in Modern. Tinderwall, illegal in Modern. Chrome Mox, banned in Modern. Lion's Eye Diamond, illegal in Modern and restricted in Vintage. Lotus Petal, restricted in Vintage, illegal in Modern. Dark Ritual, illegal in Modern. In fact, it was printed in 21 sets, but they stopped before 8th edition when they pulled their heads out of their butts. Seething Song, banned in Modern. Rite of Flame, banned in Modern. Cloud Post, illegal in Modern. Hey, you guys ever heard of a card called Summer Bloom? It's banned in Modern. Are you seeing a pattern here? Because I'm seeing a pattern here. Well, except for the fact that they left 3 of them unbanned for who the hell knows what reason. Storm is one of those non-interactive decks that they're trying to kind of frown upon or at least get rid of. It just tries to make some ridiculous combo go off, and if you're going up against its polar opposite, pure blue anti-magic, you will lose. I mean, that Ascension card needs to go. I mean, that card is stupidly, stupidly powerful. People have been complaining about Storm and Lantern Control and all those other just disgustingly unfair decks forever, and now what did they do? Vessel of Volatility. Well, you guys only have Simian, Pyretic, and Desperate. Have a 4th free mana card, because you just don't have too powerful of a deck already. With all these upgrades to Burn and Storm, I don't know what's going to happen. I think those two will take over until they ban a card. It'll ruin a couple tournaments, and everybody will be pissed again, because that's the way that Wizards does things. They let something get completely out of control, ruin a couple months worth of tournaments, and then they ban it afterwards, and then piss off the people who bought it to make sure that 100% of their player base is pissed off. They don't want to miss anybody. I'm actually shocked that the card Lightning Axe, which only costs 1, I mean it costs 6, but really it costs 1, can't hit the player, because they just basically upgraded Burn to the point where they're going to have to downgrade it. I mean, with Thing in the Ice, you can't give Burn and Storm a free board wipe with a 7/8 creature just for doing what it does in 1 turn. That is absurd. It's just stupid. I mean, I know that they say they don't technically play test for Modern, but they do keep like the top 16 Modern decks in their head when they're designing cards, and then they just decided, screw it, let's print Thing in the Ice. Now, thankfully, Thing in Ice couldn't quite go into Infect because you'd wipe out your Infect creature that you just spent a bunch of Phyrexian free boosting, so that's good news at least, but I could see it going in all kinds of other decks that spam Phyrexian spells, and it just spells the end for certain decks. I mean, they're going to go completely nuts, nobody's going to be able to afford to build them, then they'll get banned and they'll crash and everybody will be mad, so whatever, Wizards screwed up again. At least the other cards are just good. They fit in a deck, they're reasonable, and they're just good cards. They can upgrade a Modern deck just a little bit, hopefully to keep it on par with the other ones that are a little bit too powerful right now, which is definitely a good thing. So, unfortunately, they also boosted those decks up another peg, but once it gets too powerful, like I said, they always ban it, so whatever. So the overall moral of the story of this video is definitely sell every single card that I just mentioned as quickly as humanly possible while people still want it and while they're still legal. Hopefully you guys can make a little bit of profit on that, and I'll definitely see you guys next video if everybody hasn't quit MTG forever because of what they just did to Modern.